Welcome to the Athletic Approach, where we will guide you through the intricate maze of the mind in sports.
The Athletic Approach is brought to you by Culture in Sport, where we believe that culture is critical to long-term success. I'm Kristen Banowski.
And I'm Manisha Agarwal, and this is the Athletic Approach, where we don't just play the game, we understand it. Yeah, I don't know about yourself, so kind of
Yeah, well,
your
that's
interest.
that's what I wanted to ask was like, where does psychology come into all this? And I didn't realize that your primary focus with sports psych is for dance. Like it makes sense, but I didn't know that it was like that's where you wanted to focus your career kind of thing.
Yeah, like I think that's where my inspiration for it came from. But I'm not kind of like limited to like not working with other sports. Like I'm 100% open to working with other sports because at the end of the day, I'm still working with an individual who have got the
Yeah,
same
tons of
sort of
transferable
demands.
skills, I'm sure.
Yeah, and like similar demands with like across sports as well. And it's almost the same, um, kind of the same like psychological skills. It's
Yeah.
just adjusting it to the individual and to their context. But yeah, I think like my absolute dream would be to support dancers who are touring or like the GB breakdancing team. Like that would be like my dream
Hmm.
now that, breakdancing is becoming an Olympic sport. But yeah, that's kind of where my interest comes from. But I think I do want to work in other sports, but I think because I don't have first-hand experience of those other sports makes me feel a bit like, oh, like just that anxiety of like, will I fit in? Do
Yeah.
I know enough about it? But I think I need to trust my own like knowledge and experience that even though it's in a different sport, it doesn't mean that I'm not capable of, again, like transferring that
Yeah,
into
totally.
a
There's
different
like so
context.
many experiences that are shared between different sports and like different team sports, and you're part of the dance team, so there's a lot of individual aspects, and I'm sure there's a lot of team aspects which you can talk to different individual and team athletes. So and I know that that's a big thing that a lot of people talk to sports psychs about is like team dynamics and that kind of stuff.
Mm. Have you had an experience of having a sports psychologist before?
Yeah, I've had a few different sports psychs. My first one was when I was doing track in university, and then I worked with a sports psych again when I started with bobsleigh, and then I started working with a mental performance coach in my final 2 years of bobsleigh.
Mm.
My
And how was
last
your experience?
My first experience was not entirely great, to be honest. I only had one session, and I think, if I'm remembering correctly, my coach kind of recognized that I was going through a tough time, and she suggested that I go talk to the sports psych. And I basically, as it goes, took a while to actually get the courage to go talk to this person, and I like spilled my guts to this person, and she basically said, I can't really help you. You're going to need to go to, like, I was dealing with some depression and anxiety at the time, which I think is incredibly common with athletes. And fair enough, she knew that like she's not qualified to help with those things, but I had felt like like sport was contributing to these issues too. And she kind of said, you're going to need to go to the clinic and get a referral to see a psychologist, not a sports psychologist. So that was basically the beginning and the end of my first ever interaction with a sports psych.
Mm.
Um,
That's really interesting because
yeah,
I can see it from her perspective that you, because like as obviously like, as I'm in my training, is that making those referrals, especially what you said with depression and anxiety, that makes sense. But perhaps, but it doesn't mean that she can't not still support you,
yeah,
especially from that sport aspect. And I guess as well, um, just having, I don't know, maybe it's the way that she had said it or kind of,
yeah. She brought up like,
yeah, I don't
she's
know.
like kind of brought up like sports psychs work with like goal setting and stuff like that. And I don't know, I felt really like dejected at that point because I was struggling at the time, and it took me a lot to go see her. And then to be like, nope, you're gonna need to go tell this all to somebody else. I can't help you. I just like I'm I ended up putting off talking to anybody for another couple months because I was just like, oh, that sucked. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting because my boyfriend, he's on the US bobsleigh team, and we talk about this because I've been exploring potentially doing my master's in psychology, and he keeps telling me I should do it in sports psych because he's like, you're going to work with athletes. And I'm like, yes, but I want to be able to treat like the whole athlete. And from that first initial experience, and I want to be able to help with things outside of sport. I've and in his experience, he's like, I talk about everything in my entire life with my sports psych. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's, I don't know where I fall on that. And I think like general psychology might leave more doors open for me. And so we kind of talk about it a little bit because he's like, you're going to end up working with athletes anyway, just do sports psychology. But yeah,
No, that is interesting because I think I can see it from both sides because I think sports psychology in general is definitely growing bigger
yeah.
in terms of it being more than just mental skills. And again, this is something that we talk about a lot, that it is looking at more of athletes' mental health. And sometimes it's the question of should the sports psychologist upskill themselves so that they can help with other things, but then if it's out of their remit, making sure that there is a referral that can be made. And
Mm-hmm.
then obviously that's where, you kind of talk about that kind of the general psychology, that more clinical psychology where you can then be a bit more broader with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that I mean there's a thing of a clinical sports psychologist that could be something that you end up following because that is a thing. Um, but yeah, no, that is interesting. But it does make sense because it is that thing of, you know, what is a sports psychologist's role and what's a clinical
Yeah.
psychologist's
Yeah,
role.
I get the impression, I've spoken to a few professionals, and I get the impression that like a clinical psychologist can afterwards specialize in performance, but a sports psychologist can't specialize in general psychology afterwards. They would have to go back and get a whole separate certification. And
Mm,
like, so it just seems like I would have more options.
yeah, oh,
Yeah,
definitely, definitely. And I think it as well, like if you broaden yourself up into different avenues and different individuals that you want to work with, then it doesn't stop you from working with athletes anyway if you do go
exactly. Yeah.
down that path.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Um, did you study psychology as you studied it? Sorry, I know the answer to this as an undergraduate,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So I did general psychology, um, which I feel like helped me for my master's in sports psychology
Hmm.
because again, that point of having that broader knowledge,
Yeah.
um, definitely helped. Um, the only thing that I found frustrating was that in my final year, you get to pick your modules, like what you want to choose, and sports psychology wasn't an option. So I didn't learn about sports psychology until it came to my master's.
Hmm.
Well, actually, I did my dissertation in my undergrad in looking at resilience in professional
Oh,
dancers.
cool.
Um, yeah, and I guess that was like my first taste of sports psychology. And I really enjoyed that. So I was like, okay, yes, like sports psychology is the right path for me. Because in second year, it was only in second year when I realized that sports psychology is what I wanted to do because um I did so we had to do a placement, and initially I wanted to do dance movement psychotherapy,
Oh.
which is basically like a form of art therapy but using dance and movement.
Hmm.
Um, and I did a placement, and I didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I would. Well, I enjoyed it, but it made me realize that I didn't want to help people that weren't dancers with dance. I wanted to help dancers with their mental health. So then
That's
that's when it,
well, it's a very useful placement then. You kind of figured out like this is kind of
yes,
where I want to be, but this isn't exactly it.
yeah. And I think like any experience is good experience,
Hmm.
and that's something that I learned so much because even if it turns out that, it's not what you wanted to do, that isn't a bad thing. It's trial and error and it's just figuring out and that kind of, filtering out what it is that you do want to do. Um, and then, yeah, and then that summer I started my own Instagram page, Dancers Mindset, and that I, then connected with other people that are kind of in the industry that are wanting to, that have the similar goals as me, and that kind of made me feel like it was possible that I could make a career out of it because that was something again that was just a lot of doubts because a dance psychologist isn't really something that you hear of, or there isn't the funding in dance schools to
Mm.
have a sports
But
psychologist.
having talked to
Um,
you before about dance and the demands and the culture and everything, it seems like something that could be really beneficial.
yeah, yeah, no, exactly. Like you'd like to think so. And I think, yeah, because men, I think it's the stigma of mental health within dance is still kind of, I don't know, it's just a bit hit and miss. Like, and I think it depends on the culture of the dance school. Like some dance schools are open to mental health and they're so open for, you know, talking about it and they are so kind of so sometimes like, the dance teachers will take that role of a psychologist and listen to what the dancers need and kind of provide in that way. But then some dance schools are still very traditional and it, yeah, and I think it goes, and it's quite similar in different sports as well, where it is that culture thing where different organizations, different
Yeah.
clubs, no matter what the sport, it's all about the culture that's kind of ingrained within the team.
I
Um,
think that's really interesting, and I've
yeah,
actually noticed the last couple of years in bobsleigh. Bobsleigh is a very male-dominated sport, and a lot of our coaches are former bobsled athletes, and they are tough, and I think they don't always, similar to dance, acknowledge mental health. And I've noticed over the last couple of years, it's actually gotten better. And I don't know with some of them if it's just they're saying that it matters to them because they think they have to now because it's such a big topic and our sport systems are
mm,
pushing it. But either way, it's becoming more and more of a topic and not just like mental health, like in general, but also like sports performance. I've noticed that there's a lot more talk of that. Some coaches are really like, hey, let's figure out what is your optimal performance situation. Like, do you need to be mad? Do you need to be happy? Do you need to have fun? Do you need to be very serious? Like, where is your head at when you perform the best? And I've noticed like of recent it's gotten a lot better about having conversations like that amongst the team.
yeah, and I think that's something that it's that's kind of when what am I trying to say? Like it's that open communication and transparency that makes the
Yeah.
difference. And if it's not led by the
Mm-hmm.
athletes, then you don't get this same kind of autonomy. Like they won't be as motivated. Like it's one I always bring up this example of like motivation. Like if you're about to do something, but then someone tells you to do it, suddenly you don't want to do it anymore.
100%. I've had this like so as a like before this year I was a brakeman, and so the pilot generally is like kind of the leader on the team, and it's kind of always about my pilot was really great about this, but how the pilot communicates with the brakeman. It's not like let's there's a lot of work outside of sliding that we have to do, and it's all about how they phrase it. Like, when do you want to do this? Not we're doing it now. Like, when do we want to go work on this? Not I want to go do this now, come with me. Like, we're a team, you have choice, it's not my way or the highway. Like, I'm not going to dictate to you.
Yeah, no, and it's exactly that's what it is. And then if your coach is telling you like this is the way it is, or this is kind of what the culture is, and we have to go by. my rules,
Hmm.
then you lose that motivation from athletes. And I think that is like so important to then get that feedback and just be
And I
honest.
think honestly, this is one of those things that's really athlete driven. Like, not just in the control aspect, but bringing mental health and mental performance and stuff like that into the forefront of our sporting careers. Um, it honestly, I think it's becoming more of an issue within sporting organizations because athletes are pushing for these conversations. My teammate and I, we at one point had joint calls with a sports psych, and that was something we asked for and we worked like we wanted because we wanted to build a better team and better communication. And there was no coach who suggested that to us, but I think that it was a great thing that we were doing, and there was a couple other teams that were doing it too. And um, a lot of these initiatives or open conversations are often fostered by the athletes. They aren't in the set culture, you know?
Yes, yes, exactly. And that's how you build,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, that's how you then build that culture. And and sometimes you hear a lot of things where if an athlete has just joined a team, can they fit into the culture? They need to follow the culture, the club's ethos and things. And I think that's absolutely fine. But if that ethos and if the values of the club is about ensuring that athletes are welcomed and integrated and they, have a sense of belonging, they have to act on that as well. Like it's not just a one-sided thing.
Totally.
Um, but then it also makes sense if if you're at a high performing club and they push for hard work, they push um for that passion, all the rest of it. And you do then have a player that comes in that, that only tries half the time. Then again, there's that conflict, which, then does fall onto the athlete. And then as psychologists, you then explore the motivations of that athlete. Why are you, why do you want to be here? What are your goals?
Mm-hmm.
Because it could just be a case of not being on the same page. But again, the first thing that needs to come into that is the open communication, because without that, we're not all mind readers. So
Open
you know.
communication and also being explicit with expectations. Like bobsleigh has a lot of turnaround in athletes and just like any sport, but it's a sport where you get a lot of people who are brand new to the sport and they're exposed to like the national team or the development level team in their first year. So there's not like a lot of grassroots. And I think often there's an issue. People think that they are coming in and disrupting the culture, but the expectations are not laid out for them. And so they maybe should think to ask more questions, but they aren't told coming in that they shouldn't be doing something or that everybody goes to the track every day, for example. Like sometimes someone thinks, oh, I need to train, so I'm going to stay back from the track. And you're like, no, your team's sliding, everybody goes. Like there's
Mm,
expectations culturally that we're all used to that you don't really think about that someone who's new doesn't know.
yes, and that's the thing. It's those hidden
Mm-hmm.
values, and I think that's what makes it difficult to integrate because you don't know because you just don't know because you've never been in that culture. And it's the same with literally everyday life, or like if you started a new job, like what's the culture of this
Yeah.
workforce, what's the culture of this company. um Even sometimes I've thought it, when I started my new job, um I was like, where do people go and sit for lunch,
Yeah.
or like do people usually bring a packed lunch, like little things
And
of
then
like,
suddenly you
oh,
find
I
out
don't
people
know.
just eat snacks at their desk all day and don't take a
Yeah,
lunch. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And it is just picking up on those cues, and it's something that you have to do, and it is just a learning
Yeah.
process, or kind of, or asking someone that you've felt like you've befriended quite early on, and asking them those questions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, it's definitely interesting, and I think it's so beneficial to have
Yeah.
a sports psych at, whatever team, whatever organization, whatever level. Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I think it's really cool to get to have these conversations with you, who's been through the whole education to become a sports psychologist, and then myself. Well, we both have a lot of sporting experience, so I'm looking forward to actually talking about different aspects of sports psychology and mental performance and kind of getting your perspective on it and getting to try out some of those techniques.
yes. I'm really looking forward to kind of discussing how you feel some of the different mental skills have gone,
Yeah,
and
so
kind
we're
of,
thinking about
yeah,
talking about I know we talked about self-talk, a little bit about control and focusing what's in your control versus out of your control. What else do we plan to talk about? Yeah,
meditation and
perfect. Yeah,
visualization as well. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, can't
sounds
wait.
good. And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Athletic Approach. We hope you gain new insights into the mental dimensions of sport performance and are inspired to dive deeper into this fascinating field.
The Athletic Approach is produced by Manisha and Dr. Jeremy Piasecki at Culture and Sports.
If today's discussion sparked your curiosity and you want to learn more, head over to cultureandsports.com. We've got a wealth of resources, articles, and research to help you understand the mental game even better.
And don't forget, you can also connect with us on your favourite social media platforms. Whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, or YouTube, you can join our community for more insightful discussions, expert tips, and a behind the scenes look at the world of mental sports performance.
Remember, the mind is a powerful tool in any athlete's training. The more you understand it, the better your game. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing your limits.
Thank you for tuning in to The Athletic Approach, where we go beyond the physical and explore the psychological. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and embrace the mental game.